All right, so let's jump into something that I think a lot of our listeners are going to find really interesting,
Yeah.
especially if they are Canadians or Mexicans
Right.
and are thinking about, or already on a TN visa,
Okay.
and maybe thinking about that green card route.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to be talking about that whole non-immigrant intent thing,
Yes. Yes.
How does that work when you're also applying for an I-140,
Yeah.
which is that, that first step to the green card?
Right.
So we're looking at this article called TN Visa, I-140 Approval and Non-Immigrant Intent.
Okay.
And one of the things that was really fascinating is that there's this case study in there
Yeah.
about this Mexican professional
Right.
who actually got their TN visa renewed after their I-140 was already approved.
Wow.
So it seems like, it's one of those common myths is that, oh, if you get the I-140 approved, there's no way you're going to get that TN visa renewed. But this shows that that's not true.
It's a really common misconception.
Yeah.
And it really kind of stops a lot of people from even starting the process.
Yeah,
They
absolutely.
think, oh, I can't even try.
Yeah.
I'm just going to get denied. So maybe for those who are listening who might not be as familiar with this whole thing, can we just back up a second and just what is a TN visa and what do we mean when we say non-immigrant intent?
Sure. Yeah. TN visa, it's specifically for professionals from Canada and Mexico working in certain fields,
Okay.
like engineering, accounting, things like that. And it allows them to come work in the U.S. temporarily.
Right.
The thing is they have to prove they have non-immigrant intent,
Right.
which basically means that they're showing that they plan to go back to their home country when their TN work ends.
Got it.
So that's basically the main thing.
Okay, so then where does the I-140 come into all of this, and why does it seem like those two things kind of contradict each other?
Yeah, so the I-140, it's like the first step in the whole green card process.
Right.
It basically says, hey, you have a job offer
Yeah.
and an employer willing to sponsor you for this permanent residency. Right. So it sounds a little bit immigrant intent-y.
Exactly.
If you put it that way. Yeah.
It kind of sounds like you're sending mixed signals there.
Yeah, like, hey, I want to stay, but I also want to leave,
Yeah.
It's kind of confusing.
Yeah, so it's like how do you balance those two things,
Right.
You have an approved I-140, but you're also saying, hey, I'm going to leave when my TN job's done.
Yeah, so how do you convince, the consular officers that, yeah, that's really your intent is to actually leave, even though you're applying for a green card? And I think this is where that case study that we're talking about is really interesting.
Right, exactly.
Because they were able to pull it off.
Yeah.
So what did they do?
Yeah, so the main thing is to remember the I-140 is just the first step.
Right.
It's not guaranteed that you're getting a green card.
Right.
And it doesn't change your current status.
Okay.
You're still on a temporary visa.
Right.
And what this person did was they were very upfront about their I-140 approval.
Okay.
They didn't try to hide it. They put it right on their DS-160.
So for people who don't know what that is.
Yeah, that's the application you fill out online for a non-immigrant visa.
Got it.
And so they just laid it all out there. And then during their interview,
Right.
they really emphasized their ties to Mexico.
Right.
Talking about their family, their property.
Okay.
Even career opportunities back home if their TN work ended.
So they kind of painted this picture of, I have this whole life outside of the U.S.
Exactly.
So it makes sense that I would go back.
Right. It wasn't just about checking boxes on the form.
Right.
It was about showing the bigger picture.
Got it.
So they were being honest.
Right.
But they were also presenting their case in a way that made sense.
Okay. So it's really about the context.
Exactly.
That you're providing.
Yeah. And being prepared to talk about that I-140 during the interview.
Right.
To explain why you're doing it, why it makes sense for your situation.
Okay. So you don't want to just like shy away from it and hope that they don't bring it up.
Right. Better be upfront.
You're going to be ready for that question.
Yeah, and be confident about it.
Okay.
So
you mentioned being prepared. Are there any like specific documents or things that people should have, to support their case?
Yeah. So think of it like evidence, to back up what you're saying.
Okay.
So like a letter from your employer.
Right.
Confirming that you're still employed.
Yeah.
And that it's a temporary position.
Right.
Recent pay stubs, bank statements that show you have ties to your home country. Even property deeds or lease agreements.
Okay.
Anything that shows you're serious about going back.
All right. So you're basically building a strong case.
Right.
And you're backing it up with actual proof.
Exactly. You got it.
Okay, cool. So I guess another question I have is, what about people who are on other types of visas?
Yeah.
and they're thinking about applying for a green card.
Right.
Does this whole I-140 and non-immigrant intent thing work differently for them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because not all visas are created equal,
Yeah. Right, of course.
under U.S. immigration law.
Fill us in on that then.
So, for example, you have H-1B and L-1 visas.
Yeah.
These are really common for professionals,
Right.
and they're considered dual intent visas.
Dual intent, what does that mean?
It means you can be on this temporary work visa,
Right.
but also have the intention of staying in the U.S. permanently,
Okay.
which is totally fine.
So that's different from the TN.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you're on an H-1B or an L-1
Right.
and you file an I-140, it's not a big deal.
Okay.
It's actually kind of expected if you're going for a green card.
Okay, so it's smooth sailing for them.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, what about students and researchers then?
So visas like F-1 for students, J-1 for exchange visitors,
Right.
those are strictly non-immigrant intents.
Got it.
So if you file an I-140 while you're on one of those,
Right.
it can be a little trickier
Okay.
because it might seem like you're going against the terms of your visa.
Right, because they're supposed to be coming here temporarily and then
Right.
going back home.
Exactly.
Okay.
It doesn't automatically disqualify you,
Right.
but it's something you definitely want to talk to an expert about.
So again, it's all about like the specific visa and like what the rules are.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so getting back to the TN visa and this case study, what was really interesting to me was just how prepared this person was.
Yeah.
It's not just like they got lucky.
Yeah.
They really had a strategy.
Yeah, they were smart about it.
Yeah. So what can we learn from that? What can other people who are thinking about, applying for a green card, what can they take away from this?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is to do your research,
Okay.
understand the process,
Yeah.
and get advice from an experienced immigration attorney.
Right. Don't try to do this all by yourself.
No, definitely not. It's complicated.
Yeah, it can be really overwhelming.
Yeah, and an attorney can really help you navigate all of that.
Right. So it's kind of like having a guide in this really unfamiliar territory.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they can help you avoid those like common mistakes that people make.
Right. They've seen it all.
And they know what to look out for.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So anything else we want to add before we move on to the next part?
Well, you mentioned documentation earlier.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That's really important too.
What do you mean by that?
Keep good records of everything.
Okay.
Your employment records, visa applications, travel history.
Mm-hmm.
Like build a paper trail
Yeah.
so you can show that you're following the rules.
So it's kind of like covering all your bases.
Yeah, just in case.
Got it. And I guess the other thing is, things are always changing.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So it's not like you can just, learn everything once and then you're good to go.
No, you got to stay informed.
Right. So how can people do that?
Well, there are a lot of good resources out there,
Yeah.
Subscribe to some immigration news sources.
Okay.
Follow government websites.
Mm.
Join online forums or communities. There's a lot of information available if you know where to look.
Right. Cool. Well, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah, we have.
We've busted that myth about the TN visa and I-140.
Yeah.
We've talked about all these different visa scenarios.
Right.
And I think we've really stressed the importance of, being prepared and getting expert advice.
Definitely. Yeah, it's crucial.
Yeah. Okay. So before we wrap up this part, I like to leave our listeners with something to think about, something
Yeah.
to kind of chew on. So what would be a good question for them to ask themselves after hearing all of this?
I think the most important question is, if I were in this situation,
Okay.
on a TN visa, thinking about a green card,
Right.
what would be my top priority?
Ooh, that's good.
Because it makes you really think about your goals.
Right. Like, what do I actually want?
Exactly. Is it career advancement,
Yeah.
family reunification,
Right.
long-term stability,
Yeah.
And once you figure out that priority,
Yeah.
how do you align your actions with that goal
Right.
while navigating all these immigration rules?
Yeah. So it's not just about, understanding the rules,
Right.
but it's also about figuring out what you want
Yeah,
and how to make it happen.
exactly. It's about taking control of your journey,
Okay. I like that.
making it work for you.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's a good place to stop for now.
Yeah,
We'll pick up the conversation in the next part.
sounds good.
Thanks for all of that.
You're welcome.
This is really helpful.
I'm glad to hear it.
All right. Catch you later.
See ya.
So it's like that saying, knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm.
Like the more you know about this stuff,
Yeah,
the better decisions you can make.
absolutely.
Right.
It's true for pretty much everything in life,
Yeah, exactly.
but especially immigration.
Okay, cool. So, I think one of the things that really stuck out to me in this case study
Mm.
was, how important it was for this person to kind of be organized and have a strategy.
Right.
It wasn't just about, hoping for the best.
No, they were proactive.
Yeah, so what can other people who are thinking about this,
Yeah.
who are on a TN and thinking about a green card, like
Right.
what are some of the big takeaways for them from this example?
Well, I think the biggest thing is documentation.
Okay.
Keeping really good records of everything.
Right, like what kinds of things?
All your employment records,
Okay.
visa applications,
Mm-hmm.
travel history,
Okay.
like anything related to your immigration journey.
So it's kind of like having a paper trail,
Yeah, exactly.
to show that you're following the rules.
Right. And to back up what you're saying.
Okay, so just in case you need it.
Just in case.
Got it. And I guess the other thing, too, is that, immigration laws, they're always changing.
Oh, yeah. Constantly.
So it's not like you can just learn everything once and then
Yeah.
you're good.
No, you got to stay informed.
Right. So how can people do that?
Well, there are a lot of good resources out there.
Yeah.
You can subscribe to immigration news sources,
Okay.
follow government websites. There are online forums and communities you can join.
Okay.
So there's definitely information available
Right.
if you look for it.
Okay, cool. So I feel like we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We've talked about that myth about the TN visa and the I-140.
Yeah.
We've looked at different visa scenarios, and I think we've really highlighted how important it is to, be prepared
Absolutely.
and seek out expert advice.
Yeah. Preparation is key.
Okay, cool. So before we wrap up this deep dive, I'd like to leave our listeners with something to kind of, think about.
Mm-hmm.
So what would be a good question for them to ask themselves after hearing all of this?
I think the most important question is,
Yeah.
if I were in this situation,
Okay.
on a TN visa,
Mm-hmm.
considering a green card,
Right.
what would be my top priority?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Because it really makes you think about
Yeah.
your goals.
Like what's important to me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is it career advancement,
Right.
family reunification,
Mm.
long-term stability?
Yeah.
What is it for you?
Okay.
And then once you figure that out,
Mm-hmm.
how can you align your actions
Right.
with that goal?
So it's not just about, following the rules. It's
Otherwise.
about what do you want
Exactly.
and how do you make it happen?
Yeah, it's about taking control of your own journey,
I like that.
making it work for you.
All right. Well, I think that's a good place to end it.
Yeah, I think so too.
It gives our listeners something to really think about.
Yeah, some food for thought.
Yeah. And maybe in the next part, we can kind of dive into some of those, different priorities.
Yeah, we can explore that more.
Cool. Thanks for all of this. This was super helpful.
You're welcome. I'm glad I could help.
All right. Talk to you soon.
See you later.
It's a journey, right? It's not just like a one-time thing.
Right, exactly.
It's like you're constantly, having to learn and adapt.
Yep, and having a plan helps a lot with that.
Right. It's like having a roadmap,
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, you know where you're going.
So you don't get lost.
All right. Well, this has been so insightful. I feel like I've learned a ton.
Me
Oh.
too. It's always good to revisit this stuff.
Yeah. And I think our listeners are going to get a lot out of this as well,
I hope so.
especially those who are kind of in that same boat,
Yeah.
thinking about that green card.
Right.
So any final words of wisdom before we wrap things up?
I guess I would just say, don't let the whole immigration process intimidate you.
Right.
It can be complicated, but it's definitely doable,
Yeah.
especially if you have the right information and support.
And I think that's really what we've been talking about today, right? Is
Yeah.
making sure you're prepared, doing your research.
Exactly.
Okay, awesome. Well, I think it's time for us to wrap up this episode of the Deep Dive.
Thanks, good.
We've really tackled a tricky topic today, this
Yeah.
whole TN visa and I-140 thing.
Right.
But hopefully we've cleared up some of the confusion,
Yeah, I think we did a good job.
especially for those who are on that green card path. And for our listeners, remember, this is just the start,
Yeah.
Keep digging, keep asking questions, and don't give up on your dreams.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Right, until next time, happy learning.
See you later.